Coach Stacy, Lynn here. Glad that you have joined me today for this live stream. Yeah, I have. I decided that I was going to jump into and I'm going to commentate today on what's been going on with Matt Walsh and his comments about therapy and therapists and whether or not therapy is worthless and useless and stuff. And I just hope that you enjoy my opinion. That's all it is. It's just my opinion. It's based on my experience though, and also based on what I know about a lot of things in the field. If you don't know who I am, I'm Stacy Lynn Harp. I am a certified master Christian life coach, retired therapist, used to be a therapist 20 something years ago. And as the Lord would have it, I went into media and was in media for about 20 years. And now I'm now a coach. Yeah, I am. You might be wondering, why am I a coach versus a therapist? By the way, if you're here, say hi too. I'm a coach because I don't like the world of therapy, bottom line. And let me explain that. I don't believe in the medical model that therapists do. I mean, if you are somebody who's engaged in the world of therapy, if you're trained as a therapist, one of the things that you're trained in is a medical model where you have to diagnose somebody using the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which I don't agree with. I just don't agree with it. And there are a lot of other things I don't like about how therapy is. And I will tell you one thing for sure is that conservatives and Christians are being persecuted as therapists. And so a lot of Christian therapists in particular have jumped ship, so to speak, because they don't want to have to deal with the liberal baloney that's going on out there. And by the way, just so you know, I'm very conservative. I'm as far right conservative as you can probably get, like way over there to the right people. Yeah. So let me share with you this tweet. It happened about a week ago that Matt Walsh said, and I am going to share my thoughts on it. Okay. So this is over on, this was posted on his Twitter account. Let's read it. This is what Matt Walsh says. He says, most therapists are worse than useless. The vast majority are liberal women who don't possess the life experience, wisdom, or moral or intellectual foundation to offer worthwhile guidance to anyone, especially men. Most of them got into the therapy business in the first place because they have their own deep mental problems. Now they're acting as life guides for other confused people, despite being no less confused themselves. Now, I will say, to be fair, I'm going to make this bigger. So I will say, to be fair, that I don't agree with him on this first line. Most therapists are worse than useless. Because you can't impugn everybody. And there are a lot of good Christian therapists out there. And I'm sure there's a lot of good conservative and even some liberal therapists that are actually pretty good at what they do. But I do understand why he's saying this. And I do believe what he says here. The vast majority are liberal women who don't possess the life experience, wisdom, or moral intellectual foundation. I'm not going to attack their intellect to offer worthwhile guidance. What I will say about this first paragraph is that it is very true that most people who go into the world of therapy and become therapists are not emotionally and mentally healthy enough to actually be a therapist. And this is the truth. I say this because I actually hang out in a lot of therapist groups on Facebook, but I also know it because I went to grad school and I graduated with 22 other people in my class in 2005. And there's only one person in that class I would actually refer anybody to, because most of everybody else in there, none of them had done their work. And that is actually the number one thing that you need to understand. If you're going to hire a coach or a therapist, you need to understand that that person is only going to be as good as emotionally healthy they are. Bottom line, if they haven't dealt with their garbage, they can cause you harm. And I will tell you, my very first therapist that I had, I will stop sharing just for a minute and then get back to this. The very first therapist I ever saw was an intern, and she was so ill equipped to deal with my amount of trauma and did immense harm to me. I mean, I was royally harmed. It took me a good 5 years to deal with what happened in 2 years of therapy with my first therapist because she was so ill equipped to deal with reality. And she said she was a Christian, but there was really no fruit of that whatsoever. So I'm going to share another. I'm going to keep reading this. Okay. So he goes on here to say, but even in the relatively rare circumstance where a therapist isn't a weird, dysfunctional person, still the practice of therapy presupposes that the best way to deal with your problems and, quote, traumas is to obsessively talk about them, which is almost always not the case. You're better off going to the gym or going for a jog. Here, I will actually say I also agree with him. I will say that a lot of therapists are weird. If you, like I said, if you go hang out in therapist groups on Facebook, you'll see it. Or go to Reddit, you'll see it. I mean, you know, but here's the thing. And I will tell you, this is interesting. Maybe it's because of my age. I'm close to 58 now. I'm almost 60. When I was in my training and actually in my previous therapy of my own, trauma wasn't even a word. I mean, it was a word, but it wasn't a word in the field. It wasn't a word that was like, oh, everything's all about trauma. We're not trauma, we're trauma informed, blah, blah. That actually didn't come about until after I got out of grad school. I graduated in 2005. So that was 21 years ago. And a ton has changed in the field, how therapists are trained since that time. So he is actually talking clearly about current therapy, where it says here that the best way to deal with your problems and traumas is to obsessively talk about them. Actually, that's exactly what they used to teach. And actually, what they actually discovered because of neuroscience is that the more you talk about your trauma, the more you talk about a specific issue in person, the more likely you are to stay stuck in it. And so when he says here, you're better off going to the gym or going for a jog, I agree. I agree that going to the gym or going for a jog is really interesting. And it's an interesting way to deal with your issue. And not only that, I will say what's really interesting also about what he's saying here is that if you don't want to be depressed, the number one cure for depression is exercise. There's been so much research that shows and suggests that if you walk, you won't be as depressed. Pretty simple. Go for a walk, people. Get outside, people. Put your feet in the grass, people. Ground yourself in nature. Listen to bird song. It actually calms down your nervous system. So Matt is actually right on that particular thing. All right, let's continue to look at what else he has to say here. So he goes on to say this. I know this is hard for people in our culture to understand, but, quote, talking it out, unquote, is actually not the way to solve your problems most of the time. There's a reason why most people in therapy stay in it forever. Therapy creates repeat customers. This is true. This is intentional. That is true. It's a symbiotic relationship. The therapist needs her clients to come back so the business is viable. The clients want to come back because they have a narcissistic desire to talk about themselves and navel gaze in lieu of actually doing anything to take charge of their own lives. And I will say, honestly, in the time that I practiced therapy, I never had one client that was narcissistic, number one. but I never had a client that didn't want to get better. So, I suppose that there are some people out there who that fall into that. I guess some people would accuse me of falling into that category because I spent a long time in my own personal therapy, but I'm not a narcissist. And most of the time, and this is where I think he gets it wrong, most of the time when I went into therapy, I wasn't actually talking about myself. I was talking about things that happened to me. I was talking about relationships. I was talking about my mother. I was talking about different things. And I was learning from my therapist how to deal with these people that had harmed me. So I don't think Matt is being fair on this point. Although, fast forward all these years, there may be more people going into therapy who have narcissistic tendencies, but I don't know. That's just iffy. So then, and basically, I'm over here on Dr. McFillin's blog. So then, Matt, he's being quoted here. Actually, I'll quote Dr. McMillan. He says, or McFillin. He says, what followed was predictable. His audience cheered, and the mental health establishment reached for its credentials and its outrage. And in all the noise, nobody bothered to sort out which of his claims are actually true. So Matt Walsh goes on to say, repressed emotions, total nonsense. Talk about programming. You're a victim of it, and you don't know it. Therapy has programmed you to sit around analyzing your own emotions, hoping to unlock some kind of secret code to happiness and success. It's all BS. Stop obsessing over yourself and go live your life. And I will say that that's totally, there's a little truth in some of what he's saying, but ultimately that's not the case for most people. And then Matt Walsh says, don't go to therapy, fix your diet, get some exercise, spend more time outdoors. You'll feel infinitely better after a week than you would in after 10 years of therapy. I'm just trying to see if there's any more on here. No, there's okay. So I'm going to stop sharing on that. And then I also want to play you a couple of pieces here. I want to also play this. So let me share this. Hold on a second. Okay, let's also comment on this one. So this bottom guy is Matt Walsh, and this is some other guy. Listen to what this guy says.
When they become adults, that's 100% your fault as the parent. If you raised your kids and you think, well, I put a roof over your head, I paid for you to have food, and I provided for you, that's the bare minimum. If that wasn't enough for them to want to continue a relationship with you as an adult, chances are there were some significant problems within the household. So you either didn't treat the person well, you were either trying to take advantage of the person through making them parentify by watching a bunch of other children, forcing them to work, turn over part or all of their paycheck, tried to force your political and religious opinions on them. Whatever it happens to be, there is a break in there somewhere that you have responsibility for.
Oh, no, you force them to contribute. Well, you're a bad parent. Yeah, if your adult child at the age of 32 wants to cut you off because when you were 16, you made him get a job, it must be your fault. No, it's not that 32-year-old is like a spoiled little punk that needs to get over it. It can't be that. It can't be that the 32-year-old is an egotistical, arrogant, ridiculous, petulant brat that needs to grow up. That can't be it. That can't be it. No, because he's in therapy. So everything he feels is good. Everything he feels is valid. Oh, and God forbid you force your religious opinions on your child, otherwise known as raising them in the faith, in your faith, which is what, I don't know, every generation of humans have done since the beginning of human civilization. But by this guy's telling, and according to many other people, especially therapists, if you were raised in a way that is totally consistent with how billions of other people have been raised, then you're a victim. You are now morally justified in disowning your family.
So that's actually an interesting. I'm going to stop sharing here. That's actually an interesting bit of footage to me because there are really two sides. And I understand Matt's side is basically build a bridge, get over it. Everybody does this. This is how you've been raised, so you get to deal with it, right? But what I will say is I actually tend to lean towards the first guy's point of view, because he makes some really good points. Like, number one, if all your parents did was feed you and clothe you, there are other reasons why a lot of us will cut off our parents. I know I cut off my mom because she was a pathological liar and completely abusive. She didn't raise me, contrary to what Matt Walsh believes. My mom didn't raise me in the church. She didn't raise me in any faith. In fact, I came to Jesus, I came to Christ as a result of somebody sharing the gospel with me in high school. And after 10 years of my own therapy, I finally cut my mother off. Why? Because she was a sociopath, basically, a pathological liar, a covert narcissist, and she did the bare minimum to keep a roof over my head with some of the things. So, Matt Walsh seems to want to like attack a lot of these people who are cutting off their parents, but not in all cases do people cut off their parents. I mean, what sane kid, honestly, would want to cut off their mom and their dad? Honestly, we are born attached to our parents, and in some cases, very trauma bonded to our parents, which was my case. I was very trauma bonded to my therapist, not my therapist, my parent. That was weird. But to my mother, I was totally trauma bonded to her. It took a long time. Like I said, after 10 years in therapy, I was finally able to cut my mother off. And I had 6 months of freedom without her before she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And then I went back and I took care of her until she died 2 years later. So, and I did that because I forgave my mom. But my mom never took responsibility for anything that she did to me. And she frankly didn't deserve me taking care of her. And it's only, been the last, I don't know, 10 years or so where I've actually seen like just how wicked she was. I mean, she was, but a lot of people today, the kids are cutting off their parents, I think for some for very good reason, and some are being buttheads, but I think some are doing it for actually legit reasons, because parenting in the last generation has been very bad. All right, I'm gonna play one more clip here. Let's see here. All right, this one is short.
Is to encourage you to lie about.
Oops. Okay, that was bad. All right, hold on a minute. Stop sharing. I lost it, people. I hate it when I do that. Here it is right here. This is the clip. Let me get it back up. Hold on a second. All right, got to turn the volume up here. Then I'll go ahead and I'll play it from this tab over here. Okay. All right, this is the same clip just on Facebook. So let's make this bigger.
The way that our culture works in general is to encourage you to lie about yourself to yourself so that you can feel better about yourself, or to put you on drugs so that you feel better while your inner self is obliterated. So what we have today is the obliteration of the inner self in favor of feeling good about yourself. So a lot of therapy and the way that our culture works in general.
So that's kind of interesting. What I will say is that isn't talked about enough is the medical modelization model of therapy, right? Therapists are trained to diagnose people using the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which has some research put behind it. But the problem with research is that whoever's paying for that research can make the research say whatever they want. So really, can we ever trust any research? The answer is, no, not really, unless you can actually trust the people who paid for it and funded it. I mean, that's what you got to look at. And as I was trained, in grad school, I was trained that I could take my DSM and I could put you in any category I felt like, probably 15 different diagnoses. And that's the thing. Therapists have to diagnose you. They have to. That's part of their job. They have to diagnose you. And they do this, and then they bill insurance, and insurance will pay for that specific diagnosis. So In a lot of cases, also, if you go to a therapist or a psychiatrist, they put you on medication. The medication has actually been proven. The SSR lie was that serotonin, that you don't have enough serotonin in your brain and that these medicines are going to help you because you have a chemical imbalance. That's just a flat out lie. That is a lie. It's been proven that that's a lie. And so, what's been happening now is that there's actually an awakening in the world of therapy, because a lot of therapists actually who practiced for a long time, who were suckered into that pharmaceutical lie in order to drug a generation, they feel bad because of how these drugs were thrown at people. Initially, it was just a psychiatrist that could prescribe these drugs. And then what happened was eventually they moved it to a general practitioner that could give it. Okay. Now, just in case you don't know, a marriage and family therapist or licensed professional counselor or MFT, marriage family therapist, anybody with a master's level, they cannot give you medication. Okay. A psychologist cannot give you medication. A psychologist is a doctor. They have a PsyD or a PhD. Although there has been a push for that ability to come to them. As far as I know, psychologists still cannot give medication. A psychiatrist can. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor first who actually specializes in psychiatry, working out mental stuff. So it used to be that the medication for your head, for depression, anxiety, all that was only prescribed by a psychiatrist who happens to have a medical degree, and then they specialize in mental issues, right? Over the years, what happened was the general practitioners were told, oh, you can give this medication to your clients. And then there was no oversight. So what people would do is they would actually go into their doctor after being put on Prozac or something like that. And the doctor would check in with their 10-minute session and say, oh, okay, you want a new refill, whatever. And that's what happened with Xanax, with Ativan, with Lexapro, with a lot of different drugs that people have been put on. Wellbutrin, lots of different drugs. And then what basically has happened is now a lot of people have tried to get off these drugs and they can't because they are addicted to them. So a lot of people have been lied to by the therapist movement because of all of the medical lies around the lie of the chemical imbalance. And I speak from personal experience because I went through the hell of being on these medications, gaining 100 pounds, having to lose the 100 pounds, and dealing with the addiction aspect of these medications that they claim aren't addictive, right? So I went cold turkey. I don't recommend that. That's probably the dumbest way to do it. But after 15 years of me going up and down on these medications that were supposed to help me, I went off them. I cold turkey went off them. And I had about a 4-month withdrawal period where it was hell for me. I didn't know it was withdrawal because nobody told me. But praise God, I haven't had any of these drugs in my system in almost 20 years. And now all this time later, all these decades later, because it's been almost 3 decades, a lot of people are finally waking up to this. So a lot of people look at therapy and the medication and how the culture has gotten worse and suicide rates have gotten higher and more people are depressed as a cause and effect. And I believe it. That's actually where I stand. I actually am not a fan of the medical model of doing therapy, which is why I coach. Now, what's the big difference between doing therapy and coaching? And I would say that Matt Walsh, if he actually was, honest or whatever, he would talk about the efficacy of coaching. Coaching is when somebody comes to you, number one, they don't diagnose you. Like, I'm a coach. I will not diagnose you. Although I have all that training, I still don't look at my clients and go, oh, that person must be a narcissist, or, oh, that person is a borderline personality, or, oh, that person's histrionic, or that person's antisocial. I don't do that. I look at my clients as people that God made in his image. That's the worldview I look at my clients from. And then I look at how they think. And then I look at what their goals are for getting better. And I don't encourage my clients to talk incessantly about what's going on and wrong in their life. What I do is I encourage them to look at their thought distortions that we discover through the equipping profile that I give them. And then we work on those and we integrate biblical principles and Christ-like thinking into the coaching. And all of my clients who've done the work have improved in their areas of thinking and have learned to think more like Christ as a result of it. It's one of the coolest things. And yeah, I will tell you that there is a pull almost with every single one of my clients that I've had where, they spend a short time wanting to quote, be therapized. And I'm like, I'm not your therapist. I'm your coach. You have a goal. Your goal is this. Let's get you toward your goal. Why? Because you don't want to be stuck. That's why. And honestly, if I had had the tool that I've been trained in for the last couple of years, if I had that and I learned that in grad school, that would have been way more life-changing than even some of the therapy I've gone through personally. I think that, my overarching view of therapy is this one sentence. I talked about it in my book, Pickleball Faith, Inspiration on and off the court. The relationship is the cure. The relationship that you have with your coach or your therapist, that is the cure. So if you have somebody who is emotionally unhealthy, somebody reactive, somebody who hasn't dealt with their trauma, they don't know how to deal with their own garbage, and they're supposed to be helping you, and they're bringing that into your session, you're only going to get as healthy as that person helping you. It actually goes back to a biblical principle that Jesus talked about, which was when he was talking to his disciples. Jesus said that you cannot be you cannot teach your master. Basically, you can't, I'm losing my word here, but that's the main point, is that, look, if you're coming to a coach, then expect some hard truth. Expect somebody to help guide you and to encourage you to go forward, not to go past, because just talking about stuff keeps you stuck. Now, look, I am a trauma-informed coach. So I understand trauma. I understand it very well because I've lived it myself. I've gone through it. I understand. I recognize things. I see patterns in people. Within a few minutes of talking to somebody, I can already tell how they think and where they need help because of my training as a coach, right? So Matt Walsh has some very legit concerns, but I also think he's ignorant. And I don't think you can pigeonhole the whole field of therapy and pigeonhole every single therapist out there, because not all therapists suck, right? Just like not all coaches suck. The big debate, though, here is within the therapy world and the coaching world, is that the therapists are like, oh, I don't want to be a coach. Coaches are lowly. They're not regulated. They're stupid. And then you have the coaches going, really? Well, I used to be a therapist, so tell me I'm stupid now. It's like, no. Some of us have just seen the detriment of the therapeutic world, and then we understand that a lot of people, they just want to be a perpetual victim. And as a Christian, we are not called to be victims. We are victors, period. We have the power to make good choices. We have the power to undo bad things that happen to us. God gave us an amazing brain that rewires itself if we do what he tells us to, which is to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. In the Greek there in Romans 2, it said in Romans 12:2, it actually is a continual transformation. How does that happen? It happens by you doing the right things over and over again. So if you're somebody who's been traumatized and you're ruminating on your trauma and you're focusing on your trauma, guess what? You are going to continue to feel that trauma. You're going to continue to make the groove, if you will, in your brain, it's going to get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And what I try to do and help people with as a coach is we do a new line, right? And what happens though is people go, oh, this is too hard. I can't do this right now. I can only spend, 10 minutes doing this. And I'm like, good, you do 10 minutes. You do 10 minutes meditating on scripture. Guess what happens? You do 10 minutes more, it gets deeper, and that new pathway is formed. And you know what happens to the other one? It slowly goes away. Why? Because you're not focusing on it. You're focusing on the new pathway. It's interesting. I wrote a book called Consider the Time, and it's based on Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through, I think, 11 or 8, 1 through 8. And there's a season where, I forgot which one it is because there's so many of them in there. But there is a season where it says literally you're laying down, in the Hebrew, it talks about how you're laying down, you're blazing a new trail, right? And any of us who've lived any length of time, we have had to take alternate routes to get to where we're at. Like for me, just as an example, I spent 20 years doing Christian media. Was that in my playbook? No, I always wanted to spend my life being a therapist and counseling people. But then the Lord's like, no, you go this way. I want to teach you all this stuff during doing Christian media. And he did. He taught me a lot. I've also had to learn as a writer. I'm a writer. I'm not a trained writer, but I've spent hours, thousands of hours writing. I've written 2 books, and I've written a million papers in school and grad school and college. And I've always been a writer. I remember the very first time I was honored as a writer. It was in I think it was 6th grade, and I had written a paper, and there was a poem I had written, and I'll never forget. My teacher said to me, "Can I put your poem on the wall? Because it's like the best one in the class." And I was like, "Really? Yeah, go for it." So she put my work on the wall so everybody could read it. And then when I went to college, my very first writing class, we had this assignment where we had to write a paper. It was a creative writing class. We had to write a paper about, she told us, I want you to pretend that you're an alien, and I want you to read the local newspaper and then write a paper about what the alien thinks of what's going on based on the headline. And I was like, ooh, this should be good. And I ended up writing a paper. And again, it was used as an example in that class of something good to do. So I'm just gifted in that way, So I've had to, though, go through various paths to get the knowledge and the information that I have to get to where I'm at today. And Lord willing, as I continue to get older, I will continue to go down different paths. I've gone down the path of cancer with my mother. I've gone down the path of dementia with my father, and Parkinson's with my father. I've gone down the path of infertility. I've gone down the path of separation in the early part of my marriage. I've been married almost 34 years, but 3 years in, I got separated. I had to go down that path. I learned something from it. I've gone down the path of being over-medicated by the mental health world. I've gone down the path of being in therapy. I've gone down the path of getting hurt in therapy. I know a lot about a lot of these different things. Spiritual abuse, same thing. I've gone down the path of being abused in a church. I've gone down the path of being healed in a church. So there's all these different things. If we focus on those 3 things, those things tend to grow you. And that is a reality. I've also gone, when I was doing media, I've interviewed like 1,500 people. So I've learned a lot of stuff from 1,500 people I've talked to about their books, their music. I've interviewed A-list guests like Amy Grant and Twyla Paris and Dr. Ben Carson and, other luminaries that, if you followed me for a while, you would know that, right? I've learned stuff from all of that. I remember interviewing Kay Robertson, the matriarch of Duck Dynasty. And, I learned a lot from her. And I also remember my first time talking to Twyla Paris, who a lot of you may or may not know at this point, but there's just so many things I've learned from people. I had a guest that had attempted suicide at one point, and fortunately, she didn't succeed. but she ended up in a wheelchair the rest of her life. I went down the path that the Lord had me go so that I could learn stuff. I also went down the path, a lot of you know this if you followed Bible News Radio, my old show, of being an activist. Oh, I can debate a gay activist just as well as Matt Walsh can. I know the gay activist agenda probably better than most Christians know the back of their hand. Why? Because I was an advocate. I exposed this stuff. I went into conferences and was a spy. I've gone down lots of different paths and I've learned something in every single thing. And here's what I've learned. Bottom line, what I've learned is that all of those experiences shape who you are, and the things that you focus on, you grow. And the things that you don't focus on, guess what? They diminish, right? So if you're going to spend tons of time focusing on your trauma, guess what? You're going to continue to feel traumatized. But if you look outward and you try to help people and you get some exercise despite how you feel, and this is what I teach my clients. Never put, I always use I don't have it here with me, but I can do this. You know, let's just say, for example, this is your thinking and this is your feelings. Never put your feelings in front of your thinking, because your feelings will mislead you every single time. And you know, what's interesting is scripture doesn't tell us to focus on our feelings, right? No, it doesn't. It tells us what to think about. Think upon those things that are good, true, lovely, just, of a good report. That's what you think on, right? When you let thinking lead you instead of feelings, you're not going to have the chaos that feelings lead, right? Feelings, I heard somebody say, feelings go through you like, you know, food does. I think it was Dr. Romney that said that. They come through you. There's nothing bad about feelings, but if you're going to move forward, you need to think better. You need to think right. And that's what I do as a coach. I help people to focus on how they think so that they can become aware of, this is what I'm dwelling on, right? Now, I'm not saying to deny your feelings at all, but I am saying think right. You got to think right. Here's an example. My next door neighbor lost her cat recently. This cat, I absolutely love, adore this cat. This cat started coming to my house. Sweet cat. I love this cat. And I'm really bummed out, frankly, that this cat's been missing for a couple weeks now. Every day I go outdoors, I look at it, and I'm like, come on, I hope you come home soon. I hope somebody finds you and all that. And if I really sit and think about this cat and all of that, I can feel really bummed out. And I do feel sad that this cat is gone. I mean, I'm actually very sad that this cat is gone, because it's a cool cat. I don't know what happened to it. And when you don't know what happened to something, your brain tries to fill in that space, that blank. So I could ruminate all day. I go, oh, when was the last time I saw this cat? Oh, I remember it came to my window. It put a paw on my window, and I was like doing this. I actually have video of it. And I could start crying as I think through how much I love this cat, right? Now, is that a bad thing? It is if I think and dwell on it too much. Why? Because it's not doing anything good for me. It's not. I mean, it's just making me feel sadder and sadder. And that's not what God tells us to do. He doesn't tell us to focus on the bad things. He tells us to focus on the good things. Now, this isn't toxic positivity either, by the way, you know, because the Lord also has taught us through his word that we can lament. And so I am lamenting to him about this cat. I can't believe this cat is gone. Lord, can you please find this cat for my neighbor? You know, he hears the cries of those people. He draws near to the brokenhearted. So what have I done instead? Instead, I'm like, Lord, okay, you know what? You know, I love this cat. My neighbor misses her cat. The dog and her other cat miss the cat. Lord, can you please bring this cat home somehow? Please, you know, and that's all you can do, is call out to God and believe that he hears that, you know, and then move forward. Focus yourself, focus your mind, I did this whole series on Colossians 3 on things above. Well, why? Because Christ is seated there, and so are we. We are seated up there with the Lord, right? Easier said than done, but the reality is that the more we're obedient to God's word, the healthier we will become. And also, you'll begin to see how many people have a toxic faith, because our faith isn't based on our works. Our faith is based on the fact that God loves us and our salvation is a gift to us. We can't earn it, right? So this is a lot different, than than a toxic therapy environment. I'm not going to diagnose anybody. I think Matt Walsh has some good points, but I also think he's kind of stupid, and I also think he's a little bit ignorant of a lot of things out there that have happened, and a lot of people get hurt by it. Now, I will say that if I had to give a percentage of toxicity in the world of therapy with the people that I see online, I will say that 80% of the therapists that I see online are completely toxic. And I'll also say that in the world of secular therapy, one of the big things that I see happening is there's the encroachment of the New Age movement. Tarot and witchcraft is big inside the therapy world. There are modalities like internal family systems and other horrible, rotten modalities that are actually encouraging people to believe they have parts and that those parts speak to them in different ways. And it goes completely contrary to what the Lord has called us to be as whole human beings. So I don't subscribe to any of that stuff. I know a lot of Christians that do, though, which scares me, because that tells me that they are not grounded biblically like they should be. And that's sad. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for people when they go to somebody who's supposedly supposed to be able to help them, but they can't help them. And, one of the points that Matt Walsh made about it being an industry is, if the real goal of a therapist is to get a client and help them and move forward and get them out of their office, we would have a lot fewer people in therapy. But that isn't the goal. The goal is to sucker them in there, I think, and fill their schedule so that they can keep getting paid. With me as a coach, how I work is if somebody's going to coach with me, I have them sign a 3-month contract. That's minimum, because you need time to get to know somebody so you can help them. 3 months is not long, right? And I know in 3 months, if somebody does the work, they can get something very substantial done in their life if they do the work. That's the problem, though. In therapy, you don't have to do work. In therapy, you can whine, you can be a victim, you can, all that stuff. But if you're being coached, and you're being coached by somebody who is strong enough to hold you accountable and not let you just go bleh, all over you, and say, wait a minute, what's your goal? Why'd you come to me? Are you sure you want the truth? You can't handle the truth. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Make my day. No, but you know what I'm saying? It's like coaches don't coddle. Although I am a sweet coach. I don't yell at my clients, but I'm like, hey, what's the deal here? What? Why'd you do that? Like, okay, let's talk this through. What thought distortion is this? Are you being over expectant, full of self-doubt? What's your problem? We're going to talk through it. And if you can look at yourself and then look at what God says about you, and you can learn to replace those things and again, focus forward, you will change. I've had some really hard cases with some of my clients. I had one client who I've been working with a couple of years who lost a child, and it wasn't expected. It was a stillbirth. And I will tell you, we've walked through this journey together, and I will tell you the resilience in this person far outweighs what I've seen other people go through that's completely minor compared to that. But you know what this one woman has going for her? She's got a lot going for her. She has a good family support system. She has a desire to move forward. She has a desire to become something and work at something. And she's got a compassionate heart, but she's also a little contrary. And that's something I work with. It's like that contrary part is the part that's like, you know what? I don't want to be told what to do. Okay, well, if you're going to be high and contrary, if you're going to be somebody who doesn't want direction or help, then you may as well not see me, because what's the point of throwing your money away? Right? But being contrary isn't always bad. That is a survival technique too that people have. Yeah, okay. I know for me, I said, screw you, family. I'm sick and tired of being abused by you. So yeah, that's contrary. And I decided to get help for myself. And all the family patterns that my family of origin have all been completely broken. Why? Because I was contrary, because I said, I ain't doing it your way. I learned from you what not to do. You know, alcohol is stupid. Addiction is stupid. You know, all these different things I saw you do, that was dumb. I ain't doing that. Right. So, you know, I mean, I know not everybody can do that. You know, we all have our different paths. But my point is that some people who've gone through this experience of losing a child, it would devastate them. They'd want medication. They would want to spend 5 years in bed weeping and wailing and mourning over it. And yeah, you need to mourn the loss of a child, but you can also move forward as well. And I know, because I'm barren and I had to walk through that journey myself of losing a child in a different way, but still nonetheless a huge loss, probably the biggest one in my life. And unless you've gone through it, you don't know. But that shapes who you are. And you have the ability, because God gave us choice as a gift, to move forward. You know, I feel like I'm on my soapbox here, but yeah, I'll give it a couple more minutes. You know, I have some friends who have had very difficult situations with their family, with their kids, you know, and you know, there's always two stories, right? Two sides to a situation. And the Proverbs talk about that, right? One man seems right until you hear the other guy's story. That's very true, especially in counseling or you know, when you're trying to figure out a systemic issue within a family. Why does somebody do something and then they blame their parent? Well, I don't know. Some people just don't want to take personal responsibility. That includes parents and kids, right? That happens in marriage. You know, some you know, I know people who've been married numerous times. If you've been married 3 times, guess what? It's not just the other guy. It's you. You have a bad picker. Just saying. If you've been married 3 times and you haven't been divorced or widowed, but you've had failed marriages, there's a reason for it. It's because something in you is drawn to that dysfunction in the other person. Yeah, it is. Okay. I got to get going here. But anyway, so all that to say that you have a choice. Matt Walsh is partially right, but he's also partially wrong. And I only have like 2 people I would refer to as a therapist, because most other therapists I know are pretty unhealthy people. And as far as coaching, completely different than therapy if you get somebody who knows what they're doing. There are a lot of people out there who have no clue what they're doing. And those people can coerce you and they can abuse you if you're not careful and you don't know what the signs are. If that's something you're interested in learning more about, let me know and I may do another video on that. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know by leaving a comment, give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll be back in another video. Hope you have a good day. Or as I always say, people, hope you have a better day.